Good morning and welcome to the Children and Youth Sermon today. Today we're going to be talking about communion, and I hope that you will enjoy this lesson. So, Holy Communion, which is also called the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper, has its roots in the Jewish celebration of Passover. It was at Passover that Jesus shared bread and wine with his disciples. In the Jewish tradition, the Passover meal celebrates the Israelites' delivery from slavery in Egypt, as described in Exodus 12. And I recommend reading that. It's an important part of our understanding of what Passover is and what communion is. So when Jesus and his friends had the first communion dinner, they were in the midst of celebrating this Jewish feast of Passover, and there's a specific meal called the Seder. And this practice originated in the book of Exodus, and part of Exodus 12 says, God spoke to Moses and Aaron, "This is how you should eat. You should be dressed with your sandals on your feet and your walking stick in your hand. You should eat the meal in a hurry. It is the Passover of the Lord." Then later on it says, "This will be a day of remembering for you. You will observe it as a festival to the Lord. You will observe it in every generation as a regulation for all time." So, Jesus and the disciples were celebrating Passover, and Jesus and the disciples shared bread and wine together at this meal. Christians call the bread and wine that Jesus and his disciples ate together the Eucharist. Do you know what the word Eucharist means? I will admit that I didn't either, but the word Eucharist means thanksgiving. It is a sacrament of the church. It is a mystery of God's grace. We don't understand everything that it does. It's also called communion or the Lord's Supper. I prefer communion, but all three work. And in that meal, we share bread and wine or juice. We're United Methodist, so it's typically bread and juice. So here is what Jesus did at the Passover meal. When the hour came, Jesus and his apostles reclined at the table, and he said to them, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover meal with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it again until it finds fulfillment in the kingdom of God." After taking the cup, he gave thanks and said, "Take this and divide it among you. For I tell you, I will not drink it again from the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." And he took the bread, he gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. But the hand of him who is going to betray me is with mine on the table. The Son of Man will go as it has been decreed, but woe to that man who betrays him." And then they begin to question themselves about which one of them might be who would betray, who would do this. And that was, of course, Judas. Um, so what do you notice in this story? What did Jesus say when he gave them the bread? What did he say when he gave them the cup? When we take communion in church, we often say these same words: "Take and eat. This is my body. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for so many that their sins may be forgiven." Why do you think that we repeat these words? We quote Jesus to remember that he loved us and ate with us. He ate with his disciples. He ate with Judas, who was going to betray him, right? They all received communion. And through Jesus' incarnation, meaning his life, through his death on the cross, and through his resurrection, he brought us into relationship with God. So there are some special vessels that we use when we take communion together. A lot of times you will see a cup and it looks like a wine glass. And we call that in church speak a chalice. And then a lot of times there is a plate that the bread goes on, and that is called a paten. So now you know two fancy church words to impress your parents with. Together they hold the bread and the juice. And so I want you to think about what we just read. What do the bread and the juice represent? These things remind us of Jesus' flesh and blood. And it is amazing that God became a human being, made of flesh and blood, just like us. And so when we take this meal, we remember Jesus, God, became human, became Jesus, so that we might know how we are to live, so that we might experience forgiveness and God's love. Now, thinking about and talking about the sacraments of the church, one of which is communion, can be tricky. A sacrament, I know you've heard me say that word, is an outward and visible sign of an inward and invisible grace. But what does that mean? Our experiences with baptism, which is the other sacrament, and communion, they take on a new meaning over time. And as we mature and understand our experiences and relationships with God in new ways. So every time we participate in communion, we get to experience that love and grace and forgiveness of God. And each time it might look different. So as we take communion in the next couple of weeks, think about that. What does that love, that grace, that forgiveness mean for you? I'll see you guys next week. Bye.